The candles were burning too low when my mother said it. 25 candles, flickering against the polished mahogany table like little fires trying to survive in a room that had never felt warm. The cake sat between us, white frosting perfect as always, roses piped on like they meant something. But nothing in this house ever meant what it looked like. My father cut his steak with surgical precision. Mom lifted her wine glass, that smile stretching too wide across her face. "You're 25 now," she said, voice light but sharp underneath. "Time to start carrying your weight in this family." I looked up from my untouched plate. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and expensive candles, the kind that cost more than my weekly groceries. Everything here always cost more than it should. Dad nodded without looking at me. Exactly. Still in that tiny apartment, barely making rent. Maybe it's time you start paying back all those years we supported you. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Pay back. Of course. He said it casual, like he was discussing the weather. Do you know how much we spent on your education? Your living expenses? You think we're running a charity here? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. Mom laughed, soft and cold. We've done enough, Caleb. You're not a child anymore. The chicken on my plate went blurry. I blinked hard, throat tight. It's my birthday. Then start acting like an adult. Dad's voice didn't rise. It never did. Gerald Rowan measured disappointment in quiet tones and long stares. Pay your dues. Mom leaned forward, elbows on the table, breaking her own rule about proper posture. Her eyes locked on mine. You're just a burden unless you start contributing. The word hung there. Burden. Not said in anger. Not thrown like an insult. Just stated. A fact they'd been carrying around, waiting for the right moment to set it down between us like another dish on the table. My chest felt hollow. The candles kept burning, wax dripping onto the cake nobody would eat. Outside, I could hear neighbors laughing at someone else's party, music drifting through walls that had always been too thick to let real sound through. I looked at the cake, at the candles melting into nothing, at my parents, dressed nice for a celebration that wasn't one. They'd thrown this dinner for appearances, so they could tell their friends they'd done something for their son's birthday, so they could check the box marked good parents and move on with their lives. But I'd known that already. Deep down, I'd always known. I just hadn't wanted to believe it until they said it out loud. Make a wish, Mom said, gesturing at the candles with her wine glass. I stared at those 25 flames, each one representing a year of trying to earn something that was never going to be given freely. For the first time in my life, I couldn't think of a single thing I wanted from them. So I leaned forward and blew them all out. The room went darker. Smoke curled up from the wicks, bitter and final. What did you wish for? Mom asked. I stood up, chair scraping against hardwood. Nothing. Dad frowned. Where are you going? We haven't even cut the cake. I'm not hungry anymore. I walked out of the dining room, past the portraits of ancestors who'd also measured love in dollars, through the hallway that had never felt like home even when I lived here. Behind me, I heard Mom's voice, confused and sharp. Caleb, don't be dramatic. Come back and finish dinner. But I kept walking. Up the stairs. Down the hall. Into my old bedroom that they'd kept exactly the same, like a museum exhibit of the son they'd wanted me to be. The trophies from middle school still lined the shelf. Soccer, debate, academic excellence. All the things I'd won trying to make them proud. The drawings I'd made in high school still hung crooked on the walls, sketches of buildings and bridges, the early signs of what I'd become. An architect. Not a financial consultant like Dad. Not someone who measured worth in zeros and quarterly reports. I'd chosen meaning over money, and they'd never forgiven me for it. I sat on the edge of the bed, springs creaking under me the same way they had when I was 17, and couldn't sleep, wondering why nothing I did ever felt like enough. The house was quiet now. Downstairs, I heard dishes clinking. They were cleaning up, moving on, already forgetting the moment that had just split my world in half. That's when it hit me. I'd spent 25 years trying to earn love from people who saw affection as an investment with expected returns. And I was done paying interest on something I'd never borrowed. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and started typing. Not a long message. Not an explanation they'd twist into something else. Just truth. Simple.
Clean.
Final. When I finished, I read it once, then walked back downstairs. The dining room was empty now except for the cake, half the candles pulled out and tossed aside. I grabbed a piece of paper from Dad's office, wrote out the message by hand so they'd know I meant it, and placed it on the table next to the cake nobody wanted. Then I walked to the front door. My hand was on the handle when I heard Mom's voice from the kitchen. "Caleb, are you leaving already?" I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped out into the night, cool air hitting my face like permission to breathe. Behind me, the house stood tall and perfect, every window glowing, every brick in place. A beautiful prison I'd finally escaped. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away from the only family I'd ever known. And for the first time in 25 years, I didn't look back. What would you do if your own parents called you a burden on your birthday? Drop your thoughts below. The apartment was smaller than I remembered wanting. One room, a kitchenette that barely fit a stove, a bathroom where the shower had dripped all night. But it was mine. No portraits watching me from the walls. No expectations hanging in the air like expensive perfume. I'd driven 3 hours to a city where nobody knew my last name, where I could walk down streets without running into people who'd ask about my parents, about the family business, about why I wasn't following the path they'd laid out like train tracks. The first week, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dining room. Those candles. My mother's face when she called me a burden. I kept waiting for them to call, to text, to show up at my door demanding explanations. But my phone stayed silent. It was like I'd never existed at all. I started taking freelance work, small architecture jobs nobody else wanted. A garage renovation. A coffee shop remodel. I worked 16-hour days because staying busy meant not thinking, and not thinking meant not feeling the weight of what I'd left behind. My childhood room haunted me. Not the room itself, but what it represented. All those trophies lined up like evidence of a life I'd performed instead of lived. The drawings on the walls, dreams I'd had before I learned that dreams weren't worth anything to people who measured success in dollar signs. I'd spent 18 years in that house trying to be enough, trying to earn love that should have been free. Every compliment came with conditions. Every hug felt like a transaction. Do well in school, get affection. Win the debate tournament, get a smile. Choose the right career, get their approval. But I'd chosen wrong. I'd picked passion over profit, meaning over money. And the moment I did, I became disposable. The letter I'd left sat in my mind like an echo. I'd kept it short, simple. No anger, no accusations, just truth they probably wouldn't understand. Mom, Dad, I've finally realized that you don't owe me love, and I don't owe you repayment. I'm walking away with gratitude for the lessons, even the painful ones. Don't look for me, Caleb. Some nights I wondered if they'd even read it, or if they'd just thrown it away with the leftover cake, another piece of waste to be discarded. 3 months in, I landed my first real project. A young couple wanted to turn an old warehouse into a home. They had more vision than money, more hope than sense. I designed something warm. Something that felt lived in before anyone moved in. Exposed brick, big windows, spaces that invited conversation instead of performance. When they saw the plans, the wife cried. "It's perfect," she said. "It feels like love." I went home that night and cried too, because I'd just built something my parents' house had never been. 6 months passed, then a year. The silence from them never broke. I stopped checking my phone for their names. Stopped wondering if they missed me. Stopped hoping they'd realize what they'd lost. The pain didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Became something I carried differently, like a scar instead of an open wound. I started winning small awards. Local recognition for design work that prioritized people over profit margins. My name appeared in a few articles, nothing major, but enough that people in my old circles might have seen them. Still nothing from Gerald and Lorraine Rowan. It was like they'd erase me the moment I walked out that door. But I was building something they couldn't touch. A life that didn't require their approval. Work that mattered because it made people feel something real. 2 years in, I designed a community library. The city had been about to tear down the old building, replace it with condos. I proposed something different. A space that honored the history while creating something new. Reading rooms that felt like home. Children's areas filled with light. The day it opened, hundreds of people showed up. Kids ran through halls I designed. Elderly folks sat in chairs I'd chosen. The mayor shook my hand and said, "You gave this neighborhood its heart back." I smiled, said thank you, went home and sat in my small apartment, looking at the award they'd given me. And I thought about my parents, about how they'd measure this moment in dollars instead of impact, how they'd ask about the profit margin instead of the lives changed. I was glad they weren't there. That night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had found me a few times, clients calling late, wrong numbers. But something made me pick up. "Is this Caleb Rowan?" A woman's voice. Professional. Careful.
"Yeah."
"Who's this?" "My name is Patricia Mills. I'm calling on behalf of your parents." The room tilted. I sat down hard on my bed, hand gripping the phone too tight. I haven't spoken to them in 2 years. "I know," they told me. "But Mr. Rowan, they're in trouble. Serious financial trouble. Your father made some bad investments, and they're about to lose everything. The house, their savings, all of it." I should have felt something. Concern. Worry. The pull of family obligation. Instead, I felt numb. "Why are you calling me?" Patricia hesitated. "Because they asked me to. They need help, and you're the only family they have." I laughed.
"Couldn't help it."
"I'm family now. 2 years ago, I was a burden." "Mr. Rowan, tell them I'll think about it." I hung up before she could respond. "Would you help the parents who abandoned you? Let's know what you think." The voicemail sat on my phone for 3 days before I listened to it again. Patricia Mills. Professional voice. Careful words. The kind of person my parents would hire to do the work they couldn't do themselves. They couldn't even call me directly. Couldn't pick up the phone and say, "We were wrong. We need you." Had to send someone else to deliver the message, like I was a client instead of their son. I deleted it, then restored it, then deleted it again. Work kept me busy. I'd taken on a restaurant renovation downtown, turning a failed steakhouse into something people would actually want to visit. The owner, Marcus, was a guy who'd worked 3 jobs to save enough to chase his dream. "I want people to feel welcome," he told me during our first meeting. "Not judged. Not measured. Just welcome." I knew exactly what he meant. The silence from my parents had taught me something they never intended. It taught me peace. Real peace. Not the fake quiet of a house where everyone's pretending, but the actual calm that comes from not owing anyone an explanation for existing. I worked long hours, made decent money, built a life that didn't require anyone's approval. My apartment stayed small. I could have afforded bigger by now, but I liked the simplicity. No extra rooms to fill with things I didn't need. No space for people who didn't belong there. Friends told me I should date, put myself out there. But every time I tried, I'd hit a wall when they'd ask about my family. What was I supposed to say? My parents called me a burden on my birthday, so I left and never looked back? That conversation killed the mood faster than anything. So I focused on work, on building things that lasted, on creating spaces where people felt valued instead of evaluated. 6 months after Patricia's call, I finished the community library project and immediately started another one. A homeless shelter redesign. The existing building was falling apart, cold and institutional, the kind of place that made people feel worse instead of better. I worked with the director, a woman named Claire who'd been fighting for funding for years. "These people have lost everything," she said, walking me through the old building. "The least we can do is give them a space that doesn't strip away their dignity." I designed rooms with natural light, created privacy without isolation, built common areas that encouraged community without forcing it. The day we broke ground, Claire hugged me. "You're changing lives." I thought about my parents. About their big house filled with expensive furniture and cold spaces. About how you could have everything and still build nothing worth keeping. That night, Patricia Mills called again. Mr. Rowan, I know you don't want to hear from me, but the situation has gotten worse. Your parents are 2 weeks from foreclosure. They've sold almost everything. They're asking if you'd reconsider helping them, just temporarily, until they can get back on their feet. I stared at my apartment wall. Back on their feet. Yes. Patricia, can I ask you something? Of course. Did they tell you why we don't talk? Silence on the line. Then, they said there was a disagreement about your career choices. I laughed, sharp and bitter. A disagreement. That's what they called it. Mr. Rowan. They told me I was a burden. On my birthday. Said I owed them money for raising me. For supporting me. Like I was an investment that didn't pay off. Patricia didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was softer. I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. Because people like Gerald and Lorraine Rowan don't tell the whole truth. They tell the version that makes them look better. I understand. I'm sorry for bothering you. Wait. I rubbed my eyes, exhausted. What exactly are they asking for? Enough to cover the mortgage for a few months. Maybe help with some immediate debts. They're not asking for much, considering. Considering what? Considering they spent my entire childhood making me feel like I wasn't enough? Considering they measured my worth in dollar signs and found me lacking? Patricia went quiet again. I'll think about it, I said finally. But I'm not promising anything. I hung up and sat in the dark. Part of me wanted to ignore it. To let them fall the way they'd let me fall when I needed support. When I'd chosen to follow my passion instead of their plan. But another part of me, the part that still remembered being a kid who just wanted his parents to be proud, that part felt something pulling. Not obligation. Not love. Curiosity, maybe. Or the need for closure. The next morning, I called an old friend. Nora Chen. We'd met in architecture school, struggled through the same brutal professors, celebrated each other's wins. She'd gone on to build a successful development firm while I'd stayed small, focused on meaningful projects instead of profitable ones. Caleb Rowan, she answered, voice warm. It's been too long. I know. I need advice. I told her everything. The birthday dinner. The letter. The years of silence. The calls from Patricia Mills. When I finished, Nora didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, if you're going to go back, make sure you walk in as the man they never believed you could be. Should Caleb help his parents or let them face the consequences? Drop your answer below. "8 years changes a person." At 33, I wasn't the same kid who'd blown out candles and walked away from the only home he'd known. I'd built a career, a reputation, a life that didn't crumble the moment someone questioned its worth. I stood in my office, looking at the skyline through windows I'd earned. The architecture firm I'd started 5 years ago was small but solid. We took projects others ignored, buildings that needed heart, not just height. Nora's word stuck with me. Walk in as the man they never believed you could be. She'd offered to loan me her company's Bentley for the visit. Black, sleek, impossible to ignore. The kind of car Gerald Rowan would notice before he noticed the person driving it. Make an entrance, she'd said. Not for them. For you. I'd said yes before I could talk myself out of it. Now, 2 weeks later, I was planning a trip I'd sworn I'd never make. Back to the house that had never felt like home. Back to the parents who'd made it clear I was only valuable if I fit their mold. My assistant, Jamie, knocked on the office door. Young, ambitious, reminded me of myself at that age, except he smiled more. The Henderson project just got approved, he said, grinning. They loved your design. I nodded. The Hendersons wanted to turn their grandmother's old home into a community center. Another project that meant more than it paid. Another choice Gerald Rowan would have called foolish. Good. Let's start on the revisions. Jamie hesitated. You okay? You've been distracted all week. Family stuff. Didn't know you had family, I smiled without humor. Neither did I. That weekend, I packed a bag. Nothing fancy. Jeans, a couple nice shirts, the kind of casual confidence that came from not needing to impress anyone. Saturday morning, Nora's driver delivered the Bentley. Black as midnight, polished to perfection. I ran my hand along the hood, felt the weight of what this car represented. Success they couldn't deny. Achievement they couldn't diminish. Proof that the burden they discarded had built something worth seeing. I drove out of the city as the sun climbed higher. The highway stretched ahead, familiar and foreign at once. I'd taken this route in reverse 8 years ago, running from everything I'd known. Now I was driving toward it, not running back. Walking in. Memories flooded as I got closer. The exit I'd taken 1,000 times. The gas station where Dad used to stop for coffee. The neighborhood where kids I'd grown up with had lived. I wondered if any of them still lived there. If they remembered me. If they'd heard the stories my parents probably told about the son who'd abandoned them. The Rowan estate sat at the end of a long gravel path, hidden behind gates that had always felt more like barriers than protection. I pulled up slowly, the Bentley's engine purring. The gates were open. No security system beeping. No cameras watching. First sign things had changed. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown too big for the space it occupied in my mind. The windows were dark. The garden, once maintained by professionals, looked wild now. Overgrown hedges. Uncut grass. I parked in front of the main entrance, next to an old sedan that definitely wasn't the Mercedes my parents used to drive. For a moment, I just sat there. Hands on the steering wheel. Heart beating steady. This was it. The return I'd never planned on making. The confrontation 8 years in the making. I got out of the car, grabbed my briefcase from the passenger seat. Inside it was everything I needed. Documents. Contracts. Proof of what I'd become. The front door looked the same. Dark wood, brass handle, the kind of entrance that said money before you even stepped inside. I knocked. Waited. Footsteps inside, slow and uncertain. Then the door opened. A woman I didn't recognize stood there. Middle-aged, tired eyes, wearing a simple dress. The maid, probably. Though my parents had always called them house staff like it sounded more dignified. She looked at me, at the car behind me, back at me. Can I help you? I'm Caleb Rowan. I'm here to see my parents. Her eyes went wide. Mr. Rowan? They said you'd never come back. People change their minds. She stepped aside, hands shaking slightly. Please come in. I walked into the house I'd sworn I'd never enter again. Everything had changed. The grand entryway, once filled with expensive art and furniture that cost more than most people's cars, was empty. Bare walls. Cheap console table. A mirror that looked like it came from a discount store. The portraits were gone. The chandelier was gone. Even the rug I remembered, the Persian one my mother bragged about at every party, was gone. They'd sold it all. They're in the dining room, the maid said quietly. I'll let them know you're here. She disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone in the hollowed-out shell of a house that used to drip with wealth. I walked slowly toward the dining room. Each step echoed. No expensive rugs to muffle sound. No illusions left to cushion the fall. And then I heard his voice. My father. Gerald Rowan. Thinner than I remembered. Older than I expected. Caleb? Is that really you? I stepped into the doorway and met his eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw fear there instead of disappointment. The moment of truth is here. What should Caleb say first? Comment below. My father sat at the same table where he'd carved that steak 8 years ago. But the table wasn't the same. Different wood, cheaper finish. The kind of furniture you buy when you've sold the real stuff and need something, anything, to fill the space. He looked older. Gray hair thinner. Face more lines than I remembered. Hands that used to sign checks with confidence, now resting on the table like they didn't know what else to do. My mother stood by the window. Her back to me. Shoulders tight. She'd always had perfect posture, drilled into her by etiquette classes and social pressure. Now she looked smaller. Defeated. Caleb. Dad's voice cracked, saying my name. You came. I set my briefcase down, looked around. The fancy china cabinet was gone. The expensive curtains replaced with basic blinds. Even the lighting was different, cheaper fixtures throwing harsh shadows. I see things haven't been easy. Dad cleared his throat, gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I stayed standing. I'm not staying long. Mom turned around then. Her face was older too. Makeup couldn't hide the stress lines, the weight of whatever had happened since I'd left. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw something I'd never seen before.
Shame.
We didn't think you'd actually come, she said quietly. Patricia was convincing. Dad stood up, slower than he used to. We need help, son. Just temporary. Until we can stabilize. Your mother and I, we made some mistakes. Mistakes. I let the word sit there. That's what we're calling them. Bad investments, he continued, not meeting my eyes. The market shifted. We leveraged too much. And now. He gestured around at the stripped house. Now we're about to lose it all. I picked up my briefcase, opened it slowly. You could help us, Mom said, voice brittle. Just for a few months. We're still family, aren't we? That word. Family. The same word they'd forgotten when they called me a burden. When they measured my worth and found it lacking. When they let me walk out that door and never looked back. I pulled out a thick folder. Legal documents, property records, transfer papers. Placed them on the table between us. Family, I repeated.
Yeah.
We are. Dad frowned, looking at the folder. What is this? Information, I said. About this property. Mom stepped closer. What are you talking about? I met her eyes. Kept my voice level.
Come.
The way Gerald Rowan had taught me to deliver bad news without emotion. I bought this house 3 weeks ago. Through an investment group I co-own with some colleagues. The sale finalized last Tuesday. The room went silent. Dad opened the folder with shaking hands. Started reading. His face went white. This can't be right. It's right. The bank was eager to sell. Foreclosure properties move fast when you have the capital. The revenge is unfolding. Is Caleb going too far? Let us know what you think. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad kept reading, flipping through pages like he'd find different words if he looked hard enough. His fingers trembled against the paper. You bought our house, Mom whispered. Our home. The bank's house, I corrected. You stopped owning it the moment you couldn't make payments. I just happened to be the buyer. Dad looked up, eyes red. Why would you do this? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Casual. Like we were discussing whether instead of the destruction of everything they'd built. You have 6 months to vacate. Rent-free. Consider it my final gift. 6 months. Mom's voice climbed higher. Where are we supposed to go? Anywhere you want. That's the beauty of freedom. You get to choose. Dad stood up, chair scraping harsh against the floor. This is revenge. You're punishing us.
No.
I shook my head. Punishment would be immediate eviction. Punishment would be calling in every debt, every favor, making sure you had nothing. This is mercy. Mom walked to the table, hands bracing against the edge. We made mistakes, Caleb. We said things we shouldn't have. But we're your parents. You are my parents, I said quietly. Until you made it clear that being your son came with a price tag I couldn't afford. The room felt smaller than I remembered. Or maybe the space just couldn't hold the weight of 8 years of silence finally breaking. Dad's jaw clenched. We gave you everything. A good home, education, opportunities. And you never let me forget it. My voice stayed level. Every meal came with a reminder of how much you'd spent. Every birthday was an invoice. Every choice I made that didn't match your plan was proof I'd wasted your investment. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We wanted what was best for you.
No.
You wanted what looked best. There's a difference. I picked up the folder, closed it. You have 6 months. The property management company will contact you with details. After that, this house belongs to someone else. Someone else? Dad's voice broke. Who? Me. I met his eyes. I'm turning it into something useful. Maybe a community center. Maybe housing for families who actually need it. Haven't decided yet. Mom sank into a chair. This can't be happening. It already happened. The papers are signed. The deed is transferred. This stopped being your house 3 weeks ago. Dad moved toward me, and for a second I thought he might try to grab me. Shake me. Make me take it back through force like he'd tried to control everything else in my life. But he stopped. Hands at his sides. Helpless. We're your family, he said, voice desperate now. Doesn't that mean anything? I thought about that question.
Really thought about it.
It used to, I said finally. But family isn't just blood. It's showing up. It's love without conditions. It's supporting someone even when they choose a different path than you wanted. We did support you, Mom protested, until I stopped being profitable. I grabbed my briefcase. The moment I chose architecture over finance, I became a burden. Your word, not mine. Dad's shoulders slumped. We were angry. We didn't mean. You meant it. And that's what hurt most. Not the anger, but the honesty. You finally said what you'd been thinking all along. I walked toward the door, then stopped. Looked back at them one more time. 2 people who'd raised me but never really knew me. Who'd given me a house but never a home. Who'd taught me about success but nothing about love. 6 months, I repeated. After that, you'll need to find somewhere else to live. Mom stood up fast, chair falling backward. Caleb, please. We have nowhere to go. No savings left. You're condemning us. I'm giving you more than you gave me. I left with nothing but a bag and a borrowed car. You're getting 6 months and a clean break. This is cruel, Dad said.
No.
I opened the front door. Sunlight pouring in. Cruelty would be pretending the past didn't happen. This is just consequence. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in air that didn't taste like disappointment. Behind me, I heard Mom crying. Dad saying something I couldn't make out. But I kept walking. To the Bentley. To the future. To the life I'd built without their approval. I'd come back for closure, not reconciliation. And I'd gotten exactly what I needed. The engine started smooth. I put the car in reverse, looked at the house one last time through the rearview mirror. It looked smaller every second. Just before I pulled away, movement in the window caught my eye. Mom standing there, holding something against the glass. Something small and framed. My breath caught. Even from this distance, I recognized it. The letter I'd written 8 years ago. The goodbye note I'd left on the dining table beside that uneaten cake. She'd kept it. Did Caleb go too far? Or did his parents get what they deserved? Drop your thoughts below. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape. She'd kept the letter. All these years. Through the silence. Through the fall from wealth. Through everything. She kept my words. I sat in that borrowed Bentley, expensive leather seats and premium sound system, surrounded by the proof of my success. But all I could see was that image. Mom at the window, holding my goodbye like it meant something. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mr. Rowan? Not Patricia this time. My mother's voice. Shaking.
Raw.
Please don't hang up. I didn't respond. Just listened. I know you don't want to hear from us. I know we don't deserve your time. But there's something you need to see before you leave for good. I saw everything I needed to see.
No.
Her voice cracked. You didn't.
Please.
5 minutes. Then you never have to see us again. Every instinct told me to hang up. Drive away. Let the closure be clean. But that image wouldn't leave my head. The letter. Framed.
Kept.
5 minutes, I said. Then I'm gone. I drove back. The gates still open. The house still stripped bare. This time, Mom met me at the door. Her face was blotchy from crying, makeup ruined. She looked more real than I'd ever seen her. More human. Thank you for coming back. I didn't move from the doorway. What do you want to show me? She led me through the house, past the empty rooms, Up the stairs I used to climb as a kid. To her bedroom. The master suite that used to be all cream carpets and designer furniture. Now it was basic. Simple bed. Cheap dresser. Nothing worth stealing. She walked to the closet, pulled out a box. Not just any box. My old art supply box from high school. The one I'd left behind when I moved out. Covered in paint stains and pencil marks. I kept everything, she said softly, opening it. Inside were my old drawings. Sketches of buildings I'd dreamed up at 15. Designs for bridges that would never be built. Floor plans for houses that existed only in my imagination. Underneath the drawings, more papers. Articles about my work. Every single mention of my name in local papers. The award ceremony for the community library. Reviews of projects I'd completed. She'd been following my career. In silence. From a distance. But she'd been watching. Why?
My voice came out rough.
Mom sat on the bed, holding one of my old sketches. Because I was wrong. We were wrong. And I didn't know how to tell you that. Dad appeared in the doorway. Quieter than I'd ever seen him. We framed your letter, he said. Put it on the mantle where everyone could see it. When people asked about you, we told them the truth. That you'd left because we'd failed you. I leaned against the doorframe, legs suddenly weak. Why didn't you call? Text? Anything? Mom's hands twisted in her lap. Pride at first.
Then shame.
Then fear. What do you say to someone whose life you damaged? How do you apologize for making them feel worthless?
You just do it, I said.
You pick up the phone and say the words. We were cowards.
Dad's voice was heavy.
We raised you to be strong, and when you showed that strength by walking away from us, we couldn't handle it. Mom pulled out another item from the box. A framed photo. Me as a child, grinning at a birthday cake. Different birthday. Different cake. Before everything went wrong. We kept this too, she whispered. To remind ourselves of when we still knew how to love you right. The anger I'd carried for 8 years started cracking. Not breaking. Just developing fault lines. You call me a burden. I know. Mom's voice broke. And I've hated myself for it every day since. Dad stepped into the room. We measured everything wrong, son. Success, worth, love. All of it. We thought providing material things was enough. We didn't understand that you needed us to see you, not just what you could become. I looked at these two people who'd given me life, but nearly destroyed my spirit. Who'd built an empire, but forgotten to build a family.
They looked old now. Tired.
Broken by circumstances they'd created. I bought your house, I said. That's not changing. We know, Dad said. And you have every right. But I hesitated. 6 months rent-free stands. And when you move, I want an address. Mom's head snapped up. Why? Because maybe, eventually, we can figure out what family actually means. But it starts with honesty.
And space.
And time. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You'd be willing to try? I'm not promising anything. But I'm not slamming the door either. Dad's eyes watered. He didn't try to hide it this time. That's more than we deserve. Yeah, I said. It is. Can broken families really heal? Share your story in the comments. The silence in that bedroom felt different than the silence I'd lived with for 8 years. This one had possibility in it. Uncertainty. The kind of quiet that comes before something new grows. Mom stood up, walked to the dresser, pulled open the top drawer. She lifted out something else. Something that made my throat tight. The letter. Not in the frame anymore. Just the paper, worn soft from being handled. We read this every time things got hard, she said. When the bills came. When we had to sell another piece of furniture. When friends stopped calling because we couldn't keep up appearances anymore. Dad moved closer. That line you wrote. About not owing you love, and you not owing us repayment. It destroyed us, Caleb. Because it was true. Mom traced the words with her finger. We raised you like you were a project instead of a person. Every achievement was about us. Every failure felt like our embarrassment. We never just let you exist. Why? I asked. Why does everything have to be transactional with you? Dad sat heavily on the bed. Because that's how we were raised. My father measured everything in profit and loss. Your mother's parents valued status above everything. We learned love as currency, and we spent it the same way. That's not an excuse. No, Mom said quickly. It's not. It's just context. An explanation, not a justification. She held out the letter. You wrote that you were grateful for the lessons, even the painful ones. I didn't understand that line until we lost everything. What did you learn? I asked. She looked around the bare room.
That none of it mattered.
The house, the money, the reputation. When it all fell apart, nobody came to help. The friends we'd impressed for decades disappeared. The status we'd worked for meant nothing. Dad nodded. We were alone. Really alone. And that's when we understood what we'd done to you. You made me feel alone in a house full of people, I said. Every dinner, every conversation, I felt like I was performing instead of living. I know. Mom's voice broke. And when you left, the house got so quiet. We'd go days without talking to each other. Just existing in separate rooms, pretending everything was fine. She walked to the window, same one where I'd seen her holding the letter. The night you left, after we found your note, your father and I sat at that table until sunrise. Not talking, just sitting with what we'd done. Why didn't you come after me? Dad's shoulders sagged.
Pride.
Stubbornness. Fear of admitting we were wrong. Pick any reason. They're all true. We watched you build your career from a distance, Mom continued. Every article, every award. We were so proud, Caleb. But we had no right to be. We hadn't earned it. I moved further into the room, close enough to see the other items in the box. Birthday cards I'd made as a kid. School projects. A drawing I'd done of our family when I was 7. We were all smiling in it. Holding hands. I forgot I drew this, I said, picking it up. We didn't. Mom stood beside me. That's the family we should have been. We stood there, 3 people trying to figure out how to be related again. How to rebuild something we'd never properly built in the first place. The house, I said finally. I meant what I said. You have 6 months. But I'm not turning it into a community center. Dad frowned. What are you doing with it? I'm renovating it. Turning it into transitional housing for families getting back on their feet. People who've lost everything and need a place to start over. Mom's hand went to her chest. That's beautiful. It's practical. I set the drawing down. And it's making this house into something it never was. A place where people feel welcome instead of judged. Dad stood up. Can I ask you something? I nodded. The money we need. The help Patricia asked for. Is that offer completely off the table? I'd expected this question. Had prepared for it. I'm not giving you money, I said. But I have a different offer. They both waited. I'm hiring a property manager for the new housing project. It's a live-in position. Helps families transition, maintains the building, coordinates with social services. It doesn't pay much, but it includes housing and benefits. Understanding dawned on Mom's face. You're offering us a job, she said slowly. If you want it. If you're willing to work. Actually work, not just show up for appearances. Dad's eyes widened. You'd trust us with that? I'd trust you to learn, I corrected. You'll report to my project manager. You'll follow her rules. You'll actually help people instead of judging them. And if you can't do that, you're out. Mom started crying again.
But different this time.
You're giving us a second chance. I'm giving us all one, I said. But it's conditional. On honesty. On effort. On actually being family instead of just playing the part. Dad extended his hand. We'll learn it this time. I promise. I looked at his hand for a long moment, then took it. Not a handshake celebrating success. A handshake acknowledging failure and the hard work ahead. Mom hugged me.
Tight.
Desperate. The first real hug I could remember getting from her. Thank you, she whispered. We won't waste this. Second chances or clean breaks. What would you choose? Let us know below. 3 months later, I stood in the driveway of the Rowan estate watching construction crews gut the interior. The walls that had held so many cold dinners were coming down. The rooms that had felt like prisons were being redesigned into spaces that breathed. My project manager, Sarah, stood beside me with blueprints. The family start moving in 6 weeks. We've got 12 units ready, common areas finished by month's end. I nodded, watching dust billow out the front door. And the property managers? Your parents. Sarah glanced at me. They're doing better than I expected, honestly. Your mom's been attending every training session. Your dad's actually good with maintenance issues. They showing up on time? Every day. Early, actually.
She paused.
They're trying, Caleb. Really trying. I'd seen them twice since that day in the bedroom. Once for a formal meeting about the job. Once when they'd moved their belongings into the small manager's apartment we'd built in the converted garage. Mom had looked around the tiny space and smiled. It's perfect, she'd said. It's honest. Dad had shaken my hand again. We won't let you down. I hadn't responded, just nodded and left. Trust wasn't rebuilt in moments. It was reconstructed brick by brick, like the house being transformed behind me. Sarah's phone rang. She answered, listened, then turned to me. The first family just got approved. Single mom, 2 kids. She's been in a shelter for 8 months. When can she move in? 2 weeks if we push the timeline. Push it. Sarah smiled. You know, your parents asked if they could help prepare the unit. Paint, clean, make it welcoming. What did you tell them? That I'd ask you. I thought about it. About control and letting go. About healing and forgiveness. About whether broken people could help fix things. Let them help, I said finally. But someone supervises. Always. I walked toward the house, through the construction chaos, into the space that had once held so much pain. The dining room where I'd blown out those candles was gone now. Opened up into a community kitchen where families could cook together. The bedroom where I'd written that goodbye letter was being converted into a children's playroom. Every corner that had held bad memories was being rebuilt into something useful. My phone buzzed. Text from Mom. Thank you for letting us be part of this. We're painting the first unit today. It feels like making up for lost time. Mom. I stared at the message. She'd never texted me before. Had barely used her phone for anything except calls to her social circle. I typed back slowly. Make it welcoming. That family deserves a fresh start. 3 dots appeared. Then, so do we. And we're grateful you're giving us one. I pocketed the phone, looked around at the transformation happening. This house had raised me to believe love came with conditions. That worth was measured in dollars. That family was performance art. Now it was becoming something different. A place where people could start over, without judgment. Where worth was inherent, not earned. Where family was whoever showed up to help. Sarah appeared beside me again. You okay?
Yeah.
I surprised myself by meaning it. I think I am. This project, what you're doing here, it's special. You're changing lives. Maybe. I looked up at the house, seeing both what it was and what it would become. Or maybe I'm just proving that even the most broken foundations can support something beautiful if you're willing to rebuild them right. That night, I drove back to my apartment. Small, simple mine. On my kitchen table sat a package. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a framed photo. The one from my childhood, me with the birthday cake, smiling. But it had been restored, colors brightened. The image clear again. A note in Mom's handwriting. You deserve to be celebrated then. You deserve it now. Thank you for teaching us what that actually means. Mom and Dad. I set it on the shelf beside my architecture awards and design recognition. 2 different kinds of achievement. One I'd fought for. One I'd been given. Both meaning something now.
My phone rang. Nora.
How's the project going?
Good.
Better than expected. And your parents? I smiled. Learning. We all are. That's growth, Caleb. Real growth. After we hung up, I sat by my window, looking out at the city lights. Thinking about burdens and second chances. About families that fall apart and maybe, possibly, find new ways to come together. The weight I'd carried for 8 years felt lighter. Not gone. Maybe it would never be completely gone, but lighter.
And that was enough for now.
Have you ever had to rebuild a broken relationship? Tell us about it below. 6 months after the confrontation, I got an invitation. Handwritten on simple cardstock. No expensive embossing. No pretense. The Rowan House Community Opening Celebration. You're invited to see what love without conditions can build. The event was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. I arrived early before the crowd. The house looked completely different. Warm colors on the exterior. A playground in the front yard where expensive gardens used to be. Welcome signs in multiple languages. Mom and Dad stood by the entrance, greeting early arrivals. They wore simple clothes, work shirts with the Rowan House logo. No designer labels. No status symbols. Mom saw me first. Her face lit up, genuine happiness I'd never seen before. You came. Wouldn't miss it. Dad walked over, slower now but steadier somehow. We wanted you to see what you started. I just provided the building.
No.
Mom shook her head. You provided the vision. The idea that broken things can become beautiful. She led me inside. The transformation was complete. Families filled the common areas. Kids played in spaces designed for joy. Adults talked in kitchens built for community. 12 families, Dad said quietly. Each one getting a real chance. Because you believed broken foundations could be rebuilt. We walked through the house, and person after person thanked me. Shared their stories. Showed me their apartments, filled with hope instead of despair. A woman named Maria, the first resident, grabbed my hand. My kids have their own room. We have stability. This house gave us our future back. I met her kids. Bright, smiling, doing homework at a table in their apartment. This is what the Rowan House should have always been. Not a showcase for wealth, but a foundation for lives. Later, during the celebration, Sarah pulled me aside. Your parents asked if they could say something. Is that okay? I nodded. Mom and Dad stood in the community room. Families gathered around.
Dad spoke first.
Most of you know us as the property managers. But there's something you should know about this building.
He looked at me.
This house used to be ours. Not as managers, but as owners. We lived here for 30 years, raised our son here. And we failed him every day we lived under this roof. Murmurs through the crowd. Mom continued. We taught him that love was transactional. That worth was measured in success. That family was performance. And eventually he left. Because he understood something we didn't. That real love doesn't come with conditions. Her voice shook. 8 years later, when we'd lost everything, our son bought this house. And instead of revenge, he gave us something better. Purpose. Dad put his arm around her. He turned our failure into something beautiful. Gave families like yours a place to start over. And he gave us a chance to learn what we should have known all along. They both looked at me. Thank you, Caleb, Mom said, for teaching us that the best way to heal broken foundations is to build something strong enough that others can lean on it too. The room applauded. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my parents, really seeing them. Not the people who'd called me a burden. Not the wealthy socialites who'd measured everything in dollars. Just 2 people who'd lost their way and were finding it again. Imperfectly. Slowly. But honestly. After the celebration, as the sun set, the 3 of us sat on the front steps. I have something for you, I said, pulling out an envelope. Inside was a deed. But not for this property. I bought the lot next door, I explained. I'm building another house. Smaller. Private. For family. Mom's eyes widened. Family? If you want. Once you've proven yourselves here. Once we've rebuilt what was broken. There's space for us to try again. Properly this time. Dad's voice was rough. You'd want us close? I'd want us to be family, I corrected. Real family. The kind that shows up.
Supports.
Loves without keeping score. Mom hugged me. Tight and real. We'll earn it. Every day. A young man approached hesitantly. Mid-20s, nervous energy. Mr. Owen? I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm Jason. I read about this project online. About your story. I stood up. Nice to meet you. I'm estranged from my parents, he said quietly. Have been for 3 years. They wanted me to be a lawyer. I became a teacher. They said I was throwing my life away. He looked at the house, at my parents, back at me. Do you think broken families can really heal? I thought about candles burning low, about letters kept in frames, about houses transformed from prisons into homes. I think, I said slowly, that healing requires honesty.
Space. Time.
And people willing to do the work. Jason nodded. Was it worth it? Coming back. I looked at Mom and Dad, sitting together on the steps. At the house behind us, filled with families starting over. At the future we were carefully building. Yeah, I said.
It was.
Not because it was easy, but because peace is worth more than revenge, and love without conditions is the only kind worth keeping. Jason smiled. Thank you. I think I needed to hear that. As he walked away, Mom whispered, You're inspiring people, Caleb. No, I said. I'm just proving that even the heaviest burdens can become the strongest foundations if you're willing to carry them long enough to build something beautiful. Dad stood up, looked at the house. You once said I was a burden. Thank you. That weight made me strong enough to build something beautiful. He recited the words from the card I'd sent them, the words that had closed one chapter and opened another. I meant every word, I said. The sun set behind the Rowan house. Not the house of my childhood, but the house of second chances, of transformation, of family redefined. And for the first time in my life, standing between my parents on those steps, I felt like I finally belonged somewhere. Not because they'd given me permission, but because I'd built a foundation strong enough for all of us to stand on. This is Caleb's story of turning pain into purpose. We hope it inspired you to know that broken things can be rebuilt into something beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next powerful story. Share your own journey in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, the weight you carry today might become the foundation for something amazing tomorrow. Until next time, keep building, keep healing, keep growing.